So great to be with you today as we dive into the post office. As I speak, Louis DeJoy, Postmaster General, is testifying before a committee in the United States House of Representatives. 2 days, by the way, after the democratically controlled House of Representatives passed legislation to fund the post office and to change the way that it operates. That is to say, to restrict some of the authority of Louis DeJoy as the head of the Postal Service. They passed that bill 2 days before his testimony. He's testifying right now. And they already passed the bill through the House of Representatives on Saturday. Shouldn't you normally, if you're genuinely interested in understanding the issues that are involved, shouldn't you actually hold a hearing with the head of the agency that you're going to be passing a bill directly and solely related to? Because that's all the bill. It's a very short piece of legislation. I got it right here. Shouldn't you interview that person first? Have him testify before you pass such a bill? Apparently not in the mind of the Democrats, which shows that their real intention is political, and it is not geared toward bettering the Postal Service and the quality of the services that it provides for the American people. That's why I want to dive into it. We've got some video from Friday's testimony of Mr. DeJoy before a U.S. Senate committee, where he answered a number of different questions, and I thought debunked a number of the myths about what he's supposedly doing. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about what's really going on with the U.S. Postal Service. And with Chris Edwards of the Cato Institute, and editor of downsizinggovernment.org, we're going to discuss why we should, in fact, privatize the post office, which, by the way, President Trump has not suggested. President Trump has not once suggested that we privatize the post office, despite what Nancy Pelosi has been saying. She's been out there saying, oh, the Republicans have had an agenda for years to privatize the post office, and President Trump is just trying to do that. Well, in 2018, there was a Postal Reform Commission put together under the auspices of the Trump administration, and they did not recommend privatization. They recommended reforms. They didn't recommend privatization. It is a lie that Republicans and President Trump are pushing for privatization. I think they should push for privatization, as we'll talk about, but that's an entirely different story from what they're actually doing. So let's dive in to what the post office is being accused of in terms of some of the issues happening right now, in terms of slow mail and so forth. And let's talk a little bit about what's really going on under the hood and how this compares to history. I want to start with a Washington Post article. This is pick one. The Washington Post is, like every other media outlet, reported on what's happening with regards to the post office in terms of slower mail, prescriptions getting there late, and so forth. So the post office, just last week, it was reported, has had slower mail. Okay. So this summer's mail woes, the Washington Post reports, appear to be only slightly worse than they were last year. And the delivery may be more related to the coronavirus pandemic. I wanted to highlight that portion because they're providing a significant explanation for it. They also note that this year, 27% of tracked mail was considered late compared with 23% over the same period in 2019. But delivery woes were worse in the first part of 2020, just as the pandemic hit, than during the summer when compared with the same periods last year. Louis DeJoy, the new Postmaster General, took his post on June 15th of this year. The first part of 2020 is when it was worse. It's not as bad under DeJoy as during the first part of 2020 when the pandemic was really hitting people. And everybody was trying to figure out how they were switching to mail service and so forth. You look at all these components and you have to think, okay, the pandemic is a significant issue. A lot more people wanting mail services. They want the Postal Service to provide delivery of their products, things that they want in them. Amazon, for example, has been benefiting tremendously from this pandemic because everybody's been at home and wanting services and products delivered directly to their homes. So, of course, there's going to be a slowdown in the Postal Service quality, the speed of the service. Now, one thing that DeJoy said, he specifically talked about COVID delays. Let's play cut 8. This is Louis DeJoy in the Senate hearing on Friday, where he was specifically asked about some of the reasons behind the delays around the country that have been happening in recent months, particularly in the last couple of months while he has been Postmaster General. And then we'll react.
Basically what I'm hearing out of your testimony is the delivery delays are primarily being caused by the issues related to COVID, but the changes you made in terms of process, certainly in theory, if it hadn't already improved it already, is certainly going to set you up for improvement and cost reductions and cost savings in the future.
So a substantial portion of our delays are related to COVID. I won't go as far as to not say that we had maybe a 4 or 5% hit on our service level for delayed all sorts of mail, marketing mail, everything, because it got stuck on a dock, and we're drastically bringing that down. And once that is aligned, we should have a smooth, running system at a much more high performance rate.
So that's Louis DeJoy saying the pandemic's the driving force, but there was some mail that was stuck on a dock. There are different reasons for these delays. Okay. Keep in mind, by the way, that DeJoy was not appointed by President Trump. He was appointed by a bipartisan postal commission. They're the ones who oversee the post office. They're appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And they selected DeJoy specifically because he has extensive experience in logistics, which shows that he is meant for this type of a role. And as you'll hear, too, in some of the additional clips that we have from Friday's hearing, DeJoy really knows what he's talking about and is bringing that private sector mindset. Let's go ahead and play cut 6. And this one is Louis DeJoy, Postmaster General before the United States Senate on Friday, debunking some of the claims that Democrats have been presenting about the Postal Service.
Are you suspending your policy eliminating extra trips? Yes or no?
No. I did. First of all, the policy was not to eliminate extra trips. It was to mitigate extra trips.
Okay, so now to that. We're being told that you're limiting overtime, and this could possibly add to backlogs. Are you limiting overtime, or is that being suspended right now and people will work overtime if necessary to move the mail out efficiently every single day?
Senator, we never eliminated overtime. That's
it's been curtailed significantly, is what I understand.
It has not been curtailed by me or the leadership team here.
Curtailed significantly. It's gone down. It's been limited. Will you commit to
since I've been here, we've spent $700 million on overtime. Overtime runs at a 13% rate before I got here, and it runs at a 13% rate now. I did not.
If you have a policy, you can submit that to me. I'd appreciate it. Will you commit?
I think you get the idea. Point after point after point, DeJoy has some explanation, and he's coming at it too from this private sector mindset. But when it comes to like overtime, that's one of their concerns. They've been saying, they've been squashing overtime for Postal Service employees. He says it's unchanged, 13% rate of overtime before he took the position, 13% now. $700 million spent on overtime during his tenure, which is only, 70 days. In 70 days, the Postal Service has spent $700 million on overtime. They're not slacking. Now, what of this argument? The Democrats just passed a bill in the House of Representatives on Saturday that gives $25 billion to the U.S. Post Office. Now, the bill also restricts certain things that DeJoy can or can't do between now and the election, or now and the end of the year, or now and the end of the pandemic. It's either now and the end of the pandemic or January 31st, whichever is later, not just about the election. It doesn't go through November 3rd. but they want to restrict any actions that he is already restricting himself because people are in uproar about trends that have already been in place, things that have already been in place in terms of policy shifts, moving mailboxes, shutting down sorting equipment, sorting machines. That's already stuff that is happening and has been happening for years. Now, the Democrats are saying, oh, we need to give them $25 billion because that's going to make sure that vote by mail works just fine. They need that money. Do they really need that money? Let's go to cut 11. Louis DeJoy specifically asked about the financial viability of the U.S. Postal Service, USPS, being able to fund the election, finance all of its needs for delivery during the election cycle.
Your testimony to us is that the Postal Service has the wherewithal, it has the resources, it has what it needs in order to deliver the mail safely and on time through the November election. Just to be clear about that, is that right?
So yes, Senator, two separate things though. They'll deliver on the election and cash to operate the business in the future are two separate things. But yes, we have plenty of cash to operate for the election.
We have plenty of cash to operate for the election, but no, they need $25 billion. $25 billion with a B. At USPS in order to get the election to happen. No, folks, what's really going on is there are dozens upon dozens of states, it seems, that are implementing vote-by-mail systems statewide that haven't done it before. There are going to be a lot of problems with vote-by-mail in those states that haven't done it before. We've categorized the reasons why this is the case on this program with experts. What they're trying to do is set up a scapegoat. Oh, well, we don't fund the post office enough. That's clearly the reason for the problems, not the fact that state after state after state is rushing this system into place. And as the Democrats would like it, they'd like to see states implement it without signature verification, which is, as we've talked about before, a critical element to making sure that there is election integrity in a vote-by-mail system. Now, there are two things to keep in mind when we're talking about the post office. Number one, it has had shortfalls for years. This is nothing new for USPS. Let's take a look at Pick 6. This is a graphic from Pew Research that shows how the trend has been for the U.S. Postal Service. They've been bleeding money for years. This is nothing new. You can see the trend. Net profit, billions of dollars. They haven't had a net profit since 2006, and that was only a 4-year period. And then a few years before that, but in 24 of the last 38 years from 2011 going back. So go back to 2011. 24 of the last 38 years prior to that were all losses for USPS. Let's go to Pick 5. This one lists out a number of related statistics that demonstrate the trials and tribulations financially of the post office. This $25 billion thing has nothing to do with the election, and it has everything to do with bailing out the Postal Service. No net profit since 2006. Cumulative losses of $83.1 plus billion since then. They have $11 billion that they are indebted to the U.S. Treasury and $59 billion in future health benefits. Total unfunded mandates, by the way, unfunded benefits, liabilities, $120 plus billion for pension and other post-employment liabilities. Their annual revenue last year, $71.2 billion. They peaked at $74.9 billion back in 2008, 12 years ago. This has consistently been the case. In the year 2000, the post office delivered 207.9 billion pieces of mail. It's down to 142.6 billion pieces of mail in 2019, a 31.4% decline in the past 2 decades. Now, this has all been driven by a decline in first-class mail, 33.6% drop over the past decade, because people don't need first-class mail nearly as much. They're not using the service as much. Now, one bright spot is that shipping and packages have actually doubled in the past decade to 6.2 billion pieces of mail. That's what's helping to keep it somewhat viable with deals with companies like Amazon. Shipping and packaging, keeping the post office relatively afloat, sort of, maybe preventing a sort of absolute crisis. I don't know. Workforce down to 633,108 employees as of the end of 2019. That's 30% below its 1999 peak. They've been cutting overhead costs, and yet still they constantly run deficits. The total number of Postal Service facilities is down. The data is clear here, folks. This is nothing new. Now, President Obama, let's go to pick 2 here. Please, Mr. Matoush. President Barack Obama, former President Obama, he put out a tweet. Everyone depends on the USPS, seniors for their Social Security, veterans for their prescriptions, small businesses trying to keep their doors open. They can't be collateral damage for an administration more concerned with suppressing the vote than suppressing a virus. He's talking about these delays, these reported delays in the post office. Well, I want to go back to 2015. Please drop in picks 3 and 4, and let's start with pick 3. We just showed a minute ago, the Washington Post had an article last week on post office woes. Well, let's go back 5 years, almost exactly 5 years, August 26, 2015. The number of letters arriving late has jumped by almost 50% since the start of the year. The delays have become so serious that the Postal Service's watchdog issued an urgent alert earlier this month recommending that postal officials put all further closures of mail sorting plants on hold until service stabilizes. Wait a second. I thought the Democrats were telling us that mail sorting facilities were being closed down only under Louis DeJoy, that this just started in the last couple of months. But wait, Barack Obama started it. Well, it happened under Barack Obama's presidency in 2012. He was getting rid of sorting machines. Well, it was happening during his time. See, I'm at least clarifying this. The media is trying to paint the picture and present it as though this is all Donald Trump taking these sorts of steps because Donald Trump is diabolical. He's trying to ruin not only the election, but ruin your life. He doesn't want your prescriptions to get there on time. No, the reality is that the U.S. Postal Service is largely autonomous in how it operates in a lot of ways, certainly on day-to-day affairs, certainly on decisions like closing mail sorting facilities and so forth. Now, it's not genuinely and fully autonomous. If that was the case, it would be privatized. We'll talk more about that in the next segment. But it isn't Obama who made those decisions. But hey, I guess we can blame Obama. If that's what Democrats are doing, blaming Trump for Louis DeJoy's actions. Let's go to pick 4 here. Also from the Washington Post 2015 article, almost exactly 5 years ago. First-class mail has gradually been traveling more slowly since the Postal Service started closing dozens of mail sorting plants in 2012. These longer delivery times became the new normal, or service standards in postal parlance. Mail was considered on time if it took 4 to 5 days to arrive instead of 3. On time if it was only 1 or 2 days late. Again, Obama was president. From January through June, 494 million pieces of mail did not meet the standard for local or cross-country delivery, a 48% jump from the same period last year, investigators found. 2015, these delays were happening. Folks, we're talking about the Postal Service. We're talking about a quasi-government agency here. It is constantly plagued with delays and issues. Louis DeJoy's coming in there trying to put things back on a more cogent time schedule, and it takes time to shift processes and so forth to make sure that you're focused on that sort of objective. But also, DeJoy comes in with a private sector mindset, recognizing what needs to be done in order to both cut costs and boost efficiency. The fundamental problem here, my friends, is not that Trump and DeJoy are conspiring to destroy the Postal Service, nor are they even trying to privatize the Postal Service. Only in my dreams is Trump trying to privatize the Postal Service. The reality is that this is a trend. This is a problem. This is an issue that has been going on for decades. It's nothing new. And now we have a pandemic that has demonstrably slowed the mail, contributed to the slowing of this year, as past disasters have. 2015, one other explanation that was presented by the Washington Post: hurricanes, some weather incidents. Fair enough. There are two big reasons. One can be a natural disaster or some chaotic incident that's going on. The other can be the system of the post office already has problems. Here's one final thought for you before we go to a break, and then we'll come back and talk about what to do about this situation with Chris Edwards of the Cato Institute. Nancy Pelosi said, "I'm not for splitting it up, except this is an emergency." That is to say, she's not generally for breaking up the legislation in this crisis of the pandemic. Generally, she's not. But the Postal Service is in crisis. This is an emergency, not millions of Americans still struggling to make ends meet. But the Postal Service, that is an emergency, even though the Postmaster General says we've got enough cash on hand for the election. Thanks for watching this clip from Jimmy at the Crossroads. You do not want to miss a minute of engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe today to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel, and you'll be sure to catch our live broadcast. I appreciate your support.
I got Jimmy at the crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah.